lot of people doing it. They do it at the World Economic Forum, they do it at the OECD, they do it, they do it less at UNESCO, it's true, but they do it all over the world. And the companies do it, and the public sector. So this approach, collective intelligence, knowledge creation, is something that's getting much more general. It has a basic pattern, in my view, which is this. It uses tacit to explicit. It's a learning curve. I said this yesterday. It provokes a little bit of ignorance. You say, well, there's something I don't know. It allows you to reframe and to ask new questions. So, in the context of a Futures Literacy Knowledge Lab, this is what we do. We go through the learning curve, and we create collective intelligence and new knowledge together. So it reveals existing assumptions, it allows us to use assumptions to build our own models, and then it allows us to ask new questions. So here were the 3 levels. We've only done 2 in today's, in this workshop, primarily because we're not aiming to come up with a conclusion. We're not a corporate group that's trying to deal with the problem of our water treatment plant. I mean, we're dealing with a big issue, but we said right at the very beginning that the point of this workshop was not to come up for a solution on water or cities, but rather to understand as a community of practice what we're doing around advancing people's capacity to use the future. So these Futures Literacy Knowledge Labs are a form of action research. It's a scientific method. It's a way of revealing the uniqueness of the future in the present. It involves narrative capacity, collective intelligence, and the capacity to reframe. I wanted to point out for level 2, because it came up in a number of conversations, that there are some really, and we can't get into this here, there's some real rules for doing this, narrative rules. And so there's a dual frame in level 2. There's an analytical and a narrative frame. And there's actually some technical conditions that we could go through in more detail that in order to design an effective Futures Literacy Knowledge Lab, level 1, level 2, level 3, you need to pay attention to. But you can have 2 scenarios of revolution, and they look very different. So there's stories within a frame, and we generate these stories by using certain techniques. So I'm not going to go into that. And it's again to reinforce the point that I brought up already this morning that Coffee and I were talking about, which is that there are many different tools and techniques, and we've already mentioned it. In different cultures, you start this differently. As I said, in Sierra Leone, we did it, with dancing and libation and music. We didn't do it with possibility spaces. So the idea here is sources for guiding the design of processes to become futures literate. Okay, so that's what this community of practice is about. The theory of anticipation, a theory of collective intelligence knowledge creation. Together we have a discipline of anticipation and the capacity to use the future as futures literacy. So I call this walking on 2 legs, which is probably a dangerous historical reference, but anyhow. The idea is 2 paradigms, the closed and the open together. And the idea is towards capacity, and I want to emphasize the idea of capacity, to distinguish search from choice, and to be less biased towards path dependency and colonizing the future, getting beyond a very powerful illusion, which is called the end of history illusion. What are we trying to do? The challenge is to make sense of emergence in all its forms. So we have reform, we have valorizing the past, we have adaptation, and we have discovery creation. So this makes us better at doing this. There's value added because we are able to embrace science of generality, managerialism, but also the science of specificity and experimentalism. The discipline of anticipation allows us to connect them all together, and it makes us better at dealing with transformation. So this is my last slide, second last slide. Society is now at a stage in history in which one pulse is ending and another beginning. The immense destruction a new pulse signals is both frightening and creative. It raises fundamental questions about transformation. The only way to approach such a period, in which uncertainty is very large and one cannot predict what the future holds, which I would say all the time, is not to predict, but to experiment and act inventively and exuberantly by diverse adventures in living. This is from Buzz Longman's The Asset. This kind of conclusion is reassuring in a way. It's inspiring. But the critical question is how to do it. And the Futures Literacy Knowledge Lab, which builds people's capacity to use the future and to embrace complexity, is a way to do it. So it's not just a critique of the existing system, but it's a way of suggesting a way forward. So if we don't do this, many of you have seen this before, the idea of leadership and addressing the future by finding the idea or the person who will take us from A to B across the precipice, across the danger. The obvious question is, this doesn't look very safe. This doesn't look like a very good way to do things. So how we anticipate matters, it changes the present. So that's my quick, believe it or not, my quick wrap-up of sort of the overall methodology to lay the stage for this afternoon, moving into the question of how to move forward as a group, which is the key challenge for this afternoon. So I think we have a little bit of time for questions. If I hadn't completely, yeah, we have 10, 15 minutes at least for discussion and questions, so thank you very much.
Discussing the language as being a barrier or facilitating for promoting, let's say, dialogue or cooperation between countries. But I mean, if you look at the Arab world and the state, I mean, we always keep on saying that we have so many commonalities in the Arab world. One of them is language. But as we see things are unfolding now, it's not really helping. So what we assume as being a positive, let's say, aspect or element of promoting collaboration between countries, especially the Arab countries, I mean, it's not really happening. So I think we need, I mean, the point of departure, let's say, for, let's say, the African continent is not really the same. We're not speaking the same language, not literally, but in the way we think. And this has to change if we need to promote this kind of collaboration between. So it's not, let's say, race, religion, or language, which is the barrier. It's the common language in terms of the common aspirations, common, let's say, goals. Or I mean, I'll give you another example. In Egypt, for instance, we've been trying to talk or promote very much sustainable development, but everyone has a different definition of what it means. It turned out to be just a slogan used by politicians and even civil society, but everyone has a different conception of what it means. And this is, I think, what we need to be working on. We need to use the future in a proper way, that we need to develop this kind of commonality of perceptions, understanding of issues that will help us really get there. Otherwise, we'll have different targets, different agendas, and that will take us more apart rather than bringing us together.
Thank you very much. I think it's really a very important point, but can I try and do a little reframing on it? Because I think that the issue that's raised by complexity and by collective intelligence knowledge creation is sensing, perceiving, and making sense, understanding, is something that must be continuously negotiated, even in a family, even in people who know. It's not a question of a common language per se, or even a shared lexicon. That's not enough. It's too simplistic. It's too top-down in a way. To me, the issue is, how do we create processes for shared sense-making continuously, reducing the cost of engaging in sensing and sense-making, not through assuming that a scale solution, that we've all agreed perfectly on what sustainability means, therefore we'll have